Hey, podcast listeners. Be sure to continue listening after the podcast for a very special announcement.
Welcome to Tripping Over the Ottoman. I'm David Van Deusen, here with my co-host, Abby.
And if you're new to our podcast, David and I are two super fans from totally different generations that take a deep dive into episodes of the one thing that unites us.
And that is The Dick Van Dyke Show.
And as many of you probably know, Dick Van Dyke is turning 100 years old this December 13th. Yes, you heard
Wow.
that right, 100. And so to celebrate, David and I thought we'd all take a look together at an episode of the show that deals with Rob's birthday. Now, there are a few episodes that deal with his birthday, but we are going to talk today about A Surprise Surprise is a Surprise. It's a really fun one.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. There are I actually found three talking about his birthday, this one,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then a couple of other fun ones, which was Bank Book 6565696,
Oh.
where Rob wanted that movie projector so badly for his birthday.
Well, then there's the watch one where the watch gets stolen.
And he accuses his family and friends of potentially
Hmm.
stealing the watch. We thought this would be a nice episode, particularly because I think this episode really spotlights Dick's comedic abilities from the standpoint of his facial expressions and his
Physicality,
yeah
agility.
running around that living room.
Yeah, it's so great. Now, I don't know about you, David, but I have a tradition in my life where I watch this episode every year on my birthday. And I don't know if any of you all have that tradition or not. Let us know in the comments. I'm curious if that's just me or if that's a lot of people.
I haven't done that, but maybe that should be a new tradition
You should start that, David.
that I should start. So this episode actually was season 2, episode 30, written by Carl Reiner, directed by Jerry Paris, filmed on March 19th in 1963, and airing just about a little over a month later on April 24th, 1963. What do you have for a synopsis of this episode, Abby?
Let's
See how we
see.
compare on this.
Yes. I have Rob overhears Laura talking to Millie about some secret. At first, it sounds like Laura is planning on having an affair, but then Rob learns that the secret is a surprise birthday party for him. When Laura suspects Rob knows, she makes a change of plans. Rob's pretty certain she's trying the old double reverse on him. Is she really? Only a party or none on Saturday night will tell the real story of who managed to outfox whom.
Oh, well, I have a couple. Rob drives himself beyond distraction, trying to figure out whether Laura is going to throw him a surprise party for his birthday, and if she is going to throw a surprise party, when and where it's going to happen.
That's a good one.
And the other one I have is Laura despairs when husband Rob learns of her elaborate plans to throw a surprise party for him.
That's great.
Yeah, I think all three sort of summarize it in uniquely different ways.
And we'll talk more as we go through, but I was fascinated that when I really took a look at the episode, there's not a ton of jokes. Like it's a little light on the zings, you know? And I think it's because maybe the plot is sort of, has a lot going on that they have to do a lot of, exposition and things like that. Still really fun. And the whole outfoxing each other is the comedy, but I noticed that difference from other episodes we've seen.
This is unique, I think, in that respect. Sort of there's a little intrigue and mystery at the beginning. And then, as you say, it's sort of Rob and Laura both trying to outdo each other or outfox each other as the episode progresses, sucking in Millie
Yes.
and also Buddy and Sally along the way.
Yes. Yes. To make everything better.
And a little hint of Mel along the way, too.
Yes. Yes.
Well, our scene opens with Rob coming home from work through the front door as he hears Laura and Millie talking in the kitchen. You hear Laura saying to Millie, well, he may be smart and bright, but like all men, he can be deceived.
And the whole conversation is just he's eavesdropping accidentally at first, right? But then as he slowly starts hearing these concerning phrases, it turns more into not accidental eavesdropping.
And he's got his ear right outside that little folding door on the island kitchen. Millie says back to Laura, I don't think I could ever go through with it. And Laura, do you think that you could go through with it? And now Rob, intrigued with his hearing, moves even closer to the kitchen.
And like you said, all his facial expressions here are just so amazing to watch. All he's doing is listening, but you can't take your eyes off of him.
Well, and Laura responds to Millie and she says, well, once about 3 years after we were married, she says, but Rob ended up suspecting something. So I dropped her, right? So they're hooking the listener or hooking the viewer right from the very beginning of this.
Yes.
I love Millie being a diehard friend of Laura's. She said she'll be Eliza Bentley. And Laura says, huh? And well, my very first best girlfriend, who apparently kept a secret that Millie had two boyfriends, one of which I guess was what related to Liza.
Yeah.
But she notes that deceiving a husband would be much more ticklish to do.
And just to note, when Laura says, "Who's Liza Bentley?" Rob is asking the same question to himself. Who's Liza Bentley? He's mouthing it, to himself at the same time.
The camera work here, I think, is very clever too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The juxtaposition of the camera on the other side of the folding door, the expressions that Dick does as Rob, back and forth, mouthing the
Yeah.
words, his eyebrows raising, his concern in his face.
It's wonderful.
Wonderful work on
Yeah.
Dick's part.
And Millie and Laura also doing great things, with those entendres and the play on words kind of thing. I mean, it's just a riot. It's just slowly getting worse as they
Stringing us along
Yeah.
as the viewer.
Yes.
Unfortunately, as the conversation continues, Rob inadvertently makes a noise, which Laura detects and stops and looks to Millie like, did you hear something?
And here's where we get the first, I think, moment of, like you said before, Dick's physicality and the way that he can somehow like go across an entire room in 5 seconds, and also be funny at the same time, which is amazing.
He runs across the room and jumps over the little side table next to their small sofa that they have, right? And bolts out the front door quickly so that he's not detected.
And he comes in kind of pretending to jiggle the doorknob, maybe that's the noise they heard kind of thing, like that'll be his cover.
So Laura and Millie sort of follow the noise into the main living room. And as we say, Rob re-enters the front door after a jiggle on the lock. But again, his expressions here as he's clearly out of sorts and isn't doing a good job at all hiding his emotions from Laura or Millie.
He does that very fun thing where he acts very stiff, like his whole body is like a pencil, and he's in his kind of chin's tucked in and he's barely muttering, kind of thing. He does that. He's into that in a few episodes. I remember. He's good at that.
Well, Millie excuses herself and Laura shows Millie to the front door. It hits Rob all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, I left my briefcase over there. She's going to see it and know that I've been here before. So he
Such a great part.
to the kitchen counter, the dining area, grabs it, throws it on the chair, hopefully, so that Laura doesn't determine that he'd already been there ahead of her.
Again, another like cross that somehow he's doing in seconds, and also making it hilarious. It's so well done.
I would love to know how that played out as they were rehearsing. The timing of that. Did Dick say, let me run across there, and Laura has her back turned? Yeah, I just think
it's perfect.
So much of the timing in this is so critical, but so well done.
Yeah, very.
Laura gives Rob a nice kiss and comments on how nice it is to have him home early, but it's evident Rob is really sort of cold and standoffish toward her.
And she says, your lips were very cold. And he says, well, my lips are regular room temperature. Maybe that your lips are running a fever.
Laura asks him again if everything is okay. Maybe has something happened at the office. And Rob says, well, things are always happening at the office. And he sort of, again, is very uncomfortable. And he says that he's going to go in and lie down for a bit. Off he heads to the bedroom.
We open up on scene 2 is in the kitchen in the morning. And now we open up with a very unique camera angle that we've never seen before, which is that we are looking through the kitchen, through the island window kind of cutout, and through the living room all the way to the bedroom where Rob is coming out of the door. And we can see all of that with this angle. And because it's such a weird angle, and they need that because she's about to talk on the phone and he's going to have to overhear, so they have to show everything. And to do that, they've put in another wall that's often missing on the other side of the bar. So usually we sort of see the end of that island sort of just drop off into space, kind of. And we don't, and sometimes even like I know in the Stacey Petri episode, he sits on it and hangs his feet over the edge. So it's like there's clearly no wall there. But now there is another wall that is butted right up to that island. There's even like a spice rack on it.
Spice rack.
Yeah. And we've just never seen that before. And all of a sudden we're getting this cool angle. But you understand why they had to do it when you see how the rest of the scene's going to play out.
And if you look closely, you can almost see that it literally is butted up against it. Like it doesn't really fit.
Yeah.
It's like jammed against the end of the counter. And to your point, we've never seen it before. And I don't believe we ever see it again.
I don't think so.
There are other times, maybe in a party scene, that they put an extension there.
And I think in the first episode of the series, when Richie's in the cabinets and all of that. I think that wall might be there as well. I have to take a look at that again.
But keep in mind that was an entirely different
Yes,
set
completely.
because it was the pilot done on an entirely different soundstage.
Yeah.
That was done in January of 1961, right? The show had not even been picked up when that was on stage 5 of the
Yeah.
Desilu Cahuenga studios.
Yeah.
When they were picked up for the permanent series, they moved to stage 8 and had to
Cool.
rebuild the set. So
That makes sense.
the kitchen set is entirely different. But you're right. I think it is a different, longer wall there, but the whole setup is different in that
Yeah,
pilot.
the whole kitchen is totally different.
When the scene opens, as you note, with this different camera angle, Laura's back on the phone with Millie. She says, Millie, I think that Rob suspects something. Well, as she's saying this, Rob has come out of the bedroom door. Now he's quietly tiptoeing across
To his eavesdropping spot, apparently, which is on this bar.
behind the folded door. Laura goes on to say, well, I can't stop now. I wish I could, but I'd gone too far with it already. Again, leading us as viewers further down the path as to what secret thing is going on.
And these lines are getting more and more critical. Last night there was some allusion to like maybe, and now this morning they're kind of pointing right to something that sounds like an affair. And so Rob's really, really biting his nails on this. And she even says, boy, I hope this is worth it, Millie, to go through all this deception for a few fleeting moments of excitement. And that's, I think, the one that nails it in the coffin for him.
And Rob is simply stunned at what he's hearing. And then she goes on, finally lets him off the hook and us as viewers off the hook and says, the hardest thing in the world is to give a surprise birthday party.
And we get that relief. Rob's whole demeanor changes. His face drops. He's happy, smiling. He's giving the old, fist in the air, like, yeah, kind of thing.
The reaction of Dick as Rob, just great stuff. Rob realizes that Laura's wrapping up the conversation with Millie, and now here he is, sort of hung out there in the middle of the room again.
I do like the line when she tells Millie she can pull it off. She'll be giving him something he can't get elsewhere. And she says, not indigestion, Millie, memories kind of thing. But the whole sentiment thing, which I think comes up a lot in the show, which is they're both very sentimental. You got episodes where she's keeping the boots and then the love letters. Like she's a very sentimental person. This really goes with her character here. And even I love the part where she says, well, shoot me. I'm sentimental. And then Rob does a little gun pointer finger like yeah, I'll go ahead and shoot you.
Rob has managed to quickly get back across the room and get into the bedroom without being seen. And with that, Laura calls across the space to Rob in the bedroom. And Rob comes out sort of yawning and stretching like he just woke up and came out for the first time.
I love how she's his alarm clock too. Like, was he a kid getting ready for school? She's got to make sure he gets to work on time. I think that's so old school. I love it.
As Rob enters the kitchen, as you noted, his entire demeanor has now changed to be much more positive. Of course, because he's a little bit more calm now, knowing that Laura's plan is to give him the surprise party.
So they kiss good morning. He apologized to her for acting strange the night before, and they start assembling what is an awesome breakfast. I love that. Does he have this every morning? It's amazing. They got toast, scrambled eggs, cereal, orange juice, coffee. He's got all these things. So he's getting all that ready. Doesn't she ask him like, well, what was wrong with you? What was going on? Oh, I don't know. I had one of those 24-hour things. I feel good now kind of thing.
With that, Richie bolts into the kitchen and says, Mom, can I have my hard-boiled egg, my mayonnaise, my garlic press? And Rob sort of looks like, what's all this about? Richie goes on to explain that he's learned this technique in school, and he asks his dad if he wants to try it. It's how to make chopped eggs, says Richie.
What is the significance of this? Because later in the episode, Buddy also makes a comment that he's on a hard-boiled egg diet, which I think is strange. And I'm like, was there like a run on, like a overstock of hard-boiled eggs somewhere? They had to put it in the script. I couldn't figure out what the significance of this was.
I don't know that there's any relation between the eggs here and the eggs that Buddy talks about later, but I think they were looking for some small bit for Richie to do to pave the way for the conversation that would come up, that Rob would say that he likes the eggs and gives Richie then the chance to say, oh, now I know what to get you for your birthday.
Yes, that's true. It was just a bit of business to get to the birthday line. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I just wondered, I'm like, was there something I was supposed to get here? But so Richie teaches Rob how to put these eggs in through the garlic press and make these little chopped eggs, which, like you said, leads up to, oh, good, now I know what to get you for your birthday, Daddy, because he says he likes the eggs. And then Rob asks, oh, do I have another birthday coming up here again? Kind of, we know he knows.
And Laura immediately is unnerved or on a bit of edge that the whole topic of Rob's birthday has come up. One thing here, we talked about the eggs and tasting it. Eagle-eyed fans, I'll tell you to go and watch that scene. And, Rob tastes the eggs and then goes on to eat the rest of his breakfast. And there's actually a little segment where you can see a little piece of that egg that's been chopped up in the garlic press come out of Dick's mouth and fly down onto the table.
So we know he's really eating it.
The beauty of these Blu-ray discs where you can see every detail, but you can actually see this little fleck of hard-boiled egg come flying out. A little bit of trivia for you guys to go look for.
I know I mentioned this in another podcast episode, but I hope fans will indulge me. So I read somewhere Carl Reiner had said that Dick always ate anything that was on the plate in front of him that he was supposed to eat for the scene. He never faked it. He didn't move his fork around. He always ate everything. And he even mentioned there was some scenes with eggs that had been sitting out for long periods of time in the hot lights, and he still would commit and eat the eggs. So I'm wondering if this is maybe one of those episodes. I don't know.
We'll have to ask Larry sometime if he remembers doing the hard-boiled egg thing.
Oh, yeah.
To go back a little bit, so Rob does say to Laura, "Oh, do I have a birthday coming up again? What day is it?" And Laura says, "Well, I'm really not sure." And Richie says, "Well, you have a big red circle around Saturday on the calendar." So despite Laura's trying to evade the situation, Richie keeps bringing it back to her. Dick, sort of smugly having heard what he heard, says, "Oh, are you planning anything for my birthday?" And
she says quickly, "None of your business."
Planning a dinner party or anything? As she's asking this, Laura, again, unnerved, has started to pour a cup of coffee and is so distracted by the conversation that she keeps pouring the cup of coffee to the point where it literally overflows on the counter.
I love that bit. I was just watching the Emperor episode when he's at the house and he's talking with Laura, and he's asking him if he, enjoys looking at the pictures in the Emperor magazine. And as he's talking, Rob's filling up a drink for the guy, and it's just overflowing all over the floor. They do this so much, and it's such a fun gag. Then Laura says, "Oh, yeah, I'm planning a little something. I thought we'd have a little cake for lunch and then invite Buddy and Sally over, that kind of thing. Then in the night we'd go out to a nice restaurant." And Rob's, now he's on to the fact that this is a surprise party because he's overheard this on the phone. So he kind of gives her throws her a bone. I'll leave all the details up to you, okay? And you go ahead and schedule it, and I'll leave that up to you.
To which Laura says, "Okay, Rich, you guys better get going. You don't want to be late for school." And again, I don't know where this comes from. Richie says, "Well, I don't want to be late for school. We have a new teacher who hollers."
I love hollers.
And I love the way that Larry delivers that line with such glee. To which Rob says, "Well, I have an old boss who hollers."
Which I thought was such good lines.
Rob heads out of the kitchen toward the front door to head off for work.
And here we get another bit of physical comedy, which he does very well, which is that, so we had him fleeing out the front door and pretending to come in again. Then we had all these things so far. Here's another one where he's pretends to whistles and walks towards the front door do, I'm leaving for the morning, opens the door, slams it, pretends to leave. But so Laura will think that he's left. But then he, instead of going out the front door, he leaves and runs back into the hallway, where Richie's room is, because he's about to eavesdrop again.
Laura picks up the phone to call Millie because she could just sense that Rob has some idea of what's going on.
I love their female partnership system. There's these two housewives cooking up stuff to do together. And it's just really fun. I love that she has that neighbor,
This episode does give some good exchange and interchange between Laura and Millie. It's fun.
It really does.
So Laura on the phone calls Millie and she answers the phone. Rob knows. Why does he have to be so smart?
By this time, Rob's at the bar already. He's listening through the opening again.
Laura goes on to explain to Millie how she's going to try to weave the web to trick him. She'll call Buddy and Sally at home and then at the office, and that will hopefully outsmart Rob, and he won't be able to figure out what's going on about the birthday party.
Laura hangs up, and Rob again has to do his sort of hurdle over the furniture so he can get out the front door. But he's going for the front door, and he sees the kitchen door open, and Laura comes out already, so he can't make it. So he goes back and sort of hides in the hallway, kind of waits for her to walk across to the bedroom. Then he goes for the front door again, but again doesn't make it because she's going to be right there. He didn't time it out well. And so now he's crouched behind that chair that's near the front door, crouched behind it. And so we think okay, he's going to get away with this. And Laura, though, exits the bedroom. I don't know if she just has a womanly sense or she just knows her husband well or she could see him, but she just looks and she can see him crouching behind the chair and just kind of gets this smug smile oh man, I know what he's doing.
Laura proceeds to then go into the kitchen, right? And Rob thinks that he got away with it all.
Yeah.
And dashes out the front door to head off to work.
Rob doesn't know that she knows that she saw him, but we're on to, yeah, that Laura's going to cook up something different here because she calls Sally and she says, Sally, listen. And we just get in that one moment like, okay, here's the plan. We're in on it with Laura and Rob is not. And that's a really fun position to be in as a viewer, to know a little something that's going on that the main character really isn't understanding yet.
And I think that speaks to the brilliance of Reiner's writing here. As you note, we're in it with Laura. Now we're sort of siding with her to figure out how is she and we along with her going to outsmart Rob to pull this whole thing off.
Yeah, he's very good at these episodes with a lot of layers and, the audience and the characters knowing things at different times. It's just, yeah, like you said, it's a real testament to his writing ability.
So our next scene opens, which is a close-up of their three hands in the office, all flipping a coin, I guess, to see who will be the sucker who will have to go and pick up the breakfast for the rest of the group.
And again, another weird camera angle. We don't see that often. Maybe a couple times, but it's rare.
Rob asks, what can I get you? Coffee, this, that. And Buddy says, I'm on a special hard-boiled egg diet, right? That's what I'll have. And Sally asks for a certain sort of Danish, and Buddy says, oh, she'll have one of those. I'll have two of those. And Rob says, well, I thought you're on a special hard-boiled egg diet. And he says, well, that's right. He says, I can eat anything I want as long as I eat a hard-boiled egg along with it.
And then they in unison go, that's why it's a special hard-boiled egg diet, which they do that all the time. I love that. It reminded me of the bit when the delicatessen guy comes in and he does kind of a banter with Sally. Not today. Like it's that kind of thing when they're saying things in unison. Oh, it's just such a fun rapport between them all.
As Rob goes to exit, he turns and says, now, don't talk about me while I'm gone. And away he goes. And Sally and Buddy sort of look at each other like, well, why did he say that? Does he think we're going to talk about him while he's gone? Sally says, well, let's talk about that for a minute. Did Laura call you last night? And Buddy says, well, no, why? Sally says, well, she called me. She said, Rob's birthday's coming up. And I like Buddy. He said, didn't he have one of those about a year ago?
Same time? She says, most people do. And he says, well, how come you haven't had a birthday since?
And she sort of gives him that glare and freezes him in his steps.
She says, I only announce them every other year.
Every other year. Good old Sally. Buddy ends up remarking that he doesn't think Laura will ever be able to pull off a surprise party for him.
And she says, why not? And he says, well, I knew right away and I didn't go to college like Rob. I want to comment on that line because we're often, we talked about in other episodes where you have the contrast of like the college, sort of egghead character and then the people that really are on the ground doing things like Buddy's background versus like Rob's, college background. He's commenting on it here, but it's also kind of a foreshadowing of the final joke in the episode that despite Rob's intelligence and his smarts and his book smarts and all of that, his Achilles heel is that he's a little too confident. He's a little too cocky. And in the end, he gets outsmarted. So by people that don't have a college education. So I really love that bit that they do a lot there.
Sally explains to Buddy that Laura's going to call and invite them to the party. And one of them's not going to be able to make it. And Sally has it. And Buddy just can't seem to grasp what he's supposed to do, what he's supposed to say, what he's supposed to know or not know. Sally explains that Rob thinks she's planning a surprise party, but he won't suspect something if Laura calls and is just going to plan a regular dinner party and can't get all the people to come. Sally says, when Laura calls, you tell her you can make it, and I'll say I can't. But he sort of gets it, but you can see that he's a little bit confused or not quite sure of it.
And he says, are you sure this isn't a surprise party for me?
Well, with that, Rob ends up coming back with the breakfast.
And he starts distributing, the pastries, and he says, Buddy, do you want a bear claw or a bow tie? And he goes, well, I'd rather have a rabbit's foot and a pair of pants, but I'll take it.
So Rob continues in what I would characterize as somewhat of a smug tone. Well, what did you guys talk about while I was gone? As if he's going to tease them a little bit like, oh, are you talking about my surprise party while I'm gone?
And there's some great lines in here.
Yeah.
He says, what did you do while I was gone? And Buddy says, well, I built a steam locomotive. And Sally needed a tarpaulin for the infield of the Yankee Stadium. Just how it rolls off. It's still, he's got him in the chamber.
So Rob says, well, I was sort of hoping that you were going to think of some jokes for the opening while I was gone. And Rob says, well, he says, you know what? I was thinking maybe we could do a sketch where Alan's wife is planning a surprise party for him, but Alan knows all about it.
And Sally and Buddy kind of exchange glances there, like, oh, he's onto it.
And Sally says, well, what makes you think of that? And Rob says, well, Laura is actually in the process of doing that right now. And it's pretty funny. Due to deductive reasoning, the way my wife's mind works and a little eavesdropping.
He says accidental eavesdropping. Sally says
Yeah.
accidental. He said, well, for the most part.
But then he heard Laura and Millie talking on the phone about it.
And then he asked, did Laura call either of you guys? She make those calls? And Buddy says, oh, she didn't call me. And Sally says, well, Laura called me this morning for a plain dinner, but she didn't mention, there was a surprise element kind of thing. And Buddy goes, she didn't? Sally goes, no. Stern look. Get it together, Buddy.
And Rob is sort of seeing that they are in on it somehow, but they don't have their story straight.
Oh, it's so funny.
With that, the phone rings, and it's Laura on the phone. Sally answers and talks to Laura, and you can sort of sense that Laura's explaining to Sally what's going to happen for the dinner on Saturday night.
Now, I have a question, David. Maybe you
Yes.
can help me. So, at this point, she called Sally at home to just tell her, I'm going to call you at the office. And then from there, and kind of what to do. Is that what we're supposed to understand?
I think that's up to us to guess.
Yeah.
Like you said, when she said, listen, what did she clue Sally into?
Right.
What's our story going to be?
But Buddy and Sally right now they're in the same know, the two of them. Is this whole thing that they're doing then part of the ultimate surprise at the end? Like, are they just making all this up too? Like, it's very confusing, like where the layers are.
The way I interpret it as a viewer is that this is part of the plan, sort of just to throw Rob off the track.
That makes sense.
Confuse him. Now
Yep.
they don't have their story straight.
And he's focusing on that story that they're going to do the dinner but so he's kind of losing sight of that the real thing that's going to happen in the end. That makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
Sally goes on to explain to Laura that she's not going to be able to make it because she's going to be going to the theater with her Aunt Agnes down from Connecticut. And all during the conversation, as we just said, Rob is smirking broadly, thinking that he has figured everything out about how this party is going to play.
Sally says she wants to talk to you. And she hands the phone to Buddy, but Rob doesn't notice that. And he gets up smiling like, and she goes, not you, Smiley. And then Buddy gets on the phone and we have this whole interaction of Buddy it's like Sally's like hitting her forehead with her hand, like, oh my God, he's so dumb. And then, Rob's over there laughing, watching them sort of get through this, bumbling through this phone conversation.
Because under his breath, Buddy says, now, what am I supposed to say?
Say yes.
Says, yeah. So he grabs the phone and says, yes, without ever letting Laura utter a word out of her mouth.
And Rob just doubles over laughing, hearing all of this. And then Buddy, even to put a capper on it, Buddy goes, hey, Laura, Rob's here. Sally does the big hand slap to the forehead, like, oh my goodness.
Ultimately, Buddy ends up handing the phone over to Rob. We don't hear her ask Rob, but it's something to the effect of Rob asking Mel whether he might be able to come to join him at the party. And Rob says, well, I'll ask Mel. Rob ends up finishing the conversation with Laura. And now he's sure than ever that he knows that Laura's definitely planning this surprise party for him.
And Sally says, well, do you still think that? And he says, oh, yeah. Well, she says, well, you wouldn't have let you overhear her inviting everybody kind of thing. And he says, well, she would if she was pulling the double reverse half-truth check your mate gambit. That was great.
Sally's line, the next line is classic and now very outdated, but she says, you might be right, Sebastian. Do you know the reference that we're talking about here?
I had to look it up. I read in Vince Waldron's book what that was a reference to. I didn't know. Yeah, Vince writes in his book, in this episode, Sally teases Rob's amateur detective activities by referring to him as Sebastian, a now obscure reference to the actor Sebastian is a Cabot?
Yes.
Sebastian Cabot, who had recently starred as an ace criminologist on Checkmate, a popular early 60s detective series. And the use of checkmate was interesting because he just mentioned double reverse check your mate kind of thing. So I wondered if that was sort of an allusion too to that.
Folks probably know Sebastian Cabot best from Family Affair with Jodie and Buffy and Mr. French, the role of Mr. French there.
Fun little reference, though. In the end, they say, well, we don't know. You think you got it all figured out, Rob. We don't think you do, but okay.
Yeah, Sally says, I think that Laura was planning a surprise party, but you, Rat, found out about it, so now she's changed the plan.
And Buddy says, all I know is there's a free meal in there somewhere, and I'm getting it.
Rob calls Marge and asks her to have Mel come in.
And he's sort of verbally reasoning through what he thinks Mel will say when he comes in. Well, Mel's either going to say yes or no. Which I thought
and Buddy says, well, that's a brilliant deduction. So in the midst of this, Sally tries to bring some logic back to the discussion, and Rob tells her that she and Buddy are doing a great job with Laura's ploy to have this whole surprise party.
Rob says, I think when Mel comes in, he's going to use an excuse. He's going to say something like a dinner party at Allen's or a Broadway show, something that can't change. With that, Mel enters the scene.
And says, Rob, only have a second. What do you need? And Buddy says, well, a second with you is like a year with an ugly mop. Always an opportunity for Buddy to have a singer toward Mel.
The guy can't even get one line out before he's harassing him. So Rob goes ahead and invites Mel to the party on Saturday, and Mel quickly says, "Sure, yeah, we'd love to go." And there's kind of a beat where Rob's thinking like, that was a little too, that doesn't seem right to what, was going on. And then Mel says, oh, you don't mean this Saturday night, do you? And then Rob has this smile of like, there it is, yep, there's the plotting. And Mel says, well, Alan's expecting us for dinner and they're going to a concert afterwards. And Rob just says to Buddy and Sally, he used both excuses.
Yeah.
And the next line is, which I wanted to talk on real quick, is that Rob says, well, my wife thinks we should celebrate my birthday like a national holiday. I mean, I watched this when I was very young, maybe 4, 5, 6. And over the years, I've always kept that in my head of like the standard of like a great birthday for somebody is that like you just do it up, and it just shows such respect and love and admiration that like Laura has for Rob, and that like she loves this man so much and she wants him to have such an amazing birthday that she's going to go to all these crazy lengths. And I just think that's so beautiful. And I just love that.
Mel departs, and Rob sort of looks at Buddy and Sally and says, well, kids, have I got my wife figured out or haven't I? And Buddy and Sally sort of look at each other like, Rob, you don't have it. And Rob's firmly convinced that he has figured out the entire plan and how it's going to play out.
And he asks them, don't tell Laura, I want to act surprised, for her. So they say, okay, whatever.
Yeah, he says, I know it, you know it, but let's not spend any more time on it. And don't tell Laura. And when you all jump out and say surprise, I'll react and I will be properly surprised.
So the next scene, we're back in the Petrie home in the bedroom this time, though. And we see Rob is sleeping and Laura is entering. She's opening the blinds and she's got a newspaper, a glass of juice in her hand.
And it's Saturday morning.
Saturday morning. Yep. She kind of swats him with the newspaper. So he wakes up and he goes, what was that for? And gives him the juice and says, here is the second in a series of birthday surprises today. And, he drinks the juice. And he says, well, what's the first? And she's like, well, I let you sleep 2 extra hours on Saturday morning, which I thought was very sweet. Like, what does she do usually? Just get him up. Like, you have to get up. Doesn't let him sleep, I guess.
And Rob says, well, how about a third in a series of surprises? To which he gives Laura a nice good morning kiss.
And then she asks, what does he want for his birthday breakfast? He locks in bagels, kind of thing. And but then the phone rings. And Laura just lunges at it, lunges across the bed, grabs it. Oh, I got it, Rob. Let me get that. Rob's sort of like, huh. So he says he's going to go wash his face and brush his teeth, but we're all thinking the same thing, which is like, he's probably going to eavesdrop again.
Yeah, exactly.
We're waiting for it.
So Laura returns to the call to find Sally on the phone, with Sally telling Laura that she's not going to be able to make it to the surprise party that night, that she has a cold.
So at this point, this is a bit that they're doing because that we know what's going to happen in the end. So it's like she knows he's going to eavesdrop, which I think is fun. Like she knows he's going to be right there at the corner, and they're sort of planning this whole bit. It's so fun to be in on it when we know he's not.
And Laura's really making up the story here now. You mean you really, really can't make it, Sal? It's not going to be a party without you.
And as the audience, we're thinking it's real. We're with Rob. We're right with her at this point.
Rob continues to sort of rubberneck around the wall to the bathroom, right as Laura explains that only Millie and Jerry can make it. Mel's going to try to get there after the concert. As she hangs up the phone, Rob sort of makes these noises from the bathroom and pretends he's finishing brushing his teeth and washing his face and reappears in the bedroom.
Laura's just looking dejected, total despair. And again, the audience, we don't know anything either. We think this is real. He says, well, what's wrong, honey? And she says, oh, Rob, Sally has a cold. And he says, well, Sally's a big girl, honey. She'll beat that cold.
Laura, blurts out, Rob, you don't understand. And he immediately contradicts her and he says, well, I do understand.
No, you don't understand.
Yeah, she continues to cry as she explains how hard she has worked to give him the surprise birthday party and that everything that she's planned now has fallen through.
And I will contend her comedic crying is no shade to Lucille Ball, but it is so much funnier in my opinion. It is so realistic. Somehow you feel bad for her and you're laughing at the same time, which I think is a real feat to do.
I agree. Rob goes on to tell Laura, look, honey, if it will make you feel any better, I'm glad that the surprise part of it fell out. I've known what your plans were since Monday.
She says, oh, no, you couldn't have. He says, I promise you I did. And she says, well, you only knew what I wanted you to know, which, again, a little foreshadowing that that's going to be true in the end.
Laura explains her whole plan to Rob, and Rob remarks that he knew that was her plan all along. But he does tell her how much he appreciates all that she's gone through to try to make it a special surprise birthday party for him.
And we see this often where Rob is touched by Laura's sentiment and her intentions, even when like the plan falls through, which I think is a very sweet moment too.
You mentioned Mary's crying here, but there's a part right in this section. She sort of takes a big snuff,
Yes, yes. Sniff. Yeah.
When Rob's explaining this all, and she sort of like sucks this whole thing in. She says, "Well, you're welcome." I think that was really good too. Whether that was an improvised thing or I don't know.
Absolutely perfect.
So she says, "Boy, Rob, you just wait until next year. I'll surprise you on your birthday. If I have to do it 3 months early, no, not 3 months early, 3 months late, and that way you'll never guess."
And they start walking into the living room where the final scene is going to take place. And curious viewers, you can look, probably a lot of you have spotted this already, but there are some strange metal stools that are in different corners of the room. There's one by the front chair, and then there's one by the, I think the closet, like this where that plant usually is. And if you notice, they look out of place, and there's these strange metal stools. And then, but later, as the scene goes on, we'll see what they're used for. Now I can't unsee that whenever I watch it. I always see it.
As they're walking out, Rob says, "Well, why don't you just skip a year and then I'll forget my birthday?"
And she says, or maybe I'll give you a surprise party right now.
And with that,
boom.
Everyone yells surprise and comes running out from all corners of the room.
I've slowed this down too and looked for everyone's sort of bits and what they do. Like Richie's hiding behind the chair near the door. I kind of was following each person to see where they were. It was pretty fun. Very well choreographed.
Out of the woodwork comes Richie, Millie, Jerry, Mel, Buddy, Sally, and then other folks, many of whom we've never seen before and will never see again.
Yeah.
Of course, Frank Adamo makes his classic appearance here because Frank's got to be part of the scene. But there are other party guests here who we have no idea who they are.
And they don't speak, of course. So, yeah, they're just, I guess, some sort of friends from the neighborhood of life. Who knows? But I guess they had to fill out the scene, you know. Had to be a few more people to fill that out and make it look like a real surprise party.
At this point, Rob is just entirely, absolutely flabbergasted and just can't believe at the chaos and the confusion that's going around him. As you said, there's balloons, they're hanging up signs, "Happy Birthday, Rob."
And the stools are what they're standing on to get those streamers and that banner up, just because they're a little bit high, probably to hang them on a hook or something like that. And I also would say is we get a really another weird shot, which is this sort of fourth wall shot where we see the fish tank on top of like the table, kind of from the night the roof fell in that episode. There was a fish tank. All of a sudden we see that. I'm not totally certain why they have that there in this episode, because it kind of seems to serve no purpose.
I think that's a question we all want. Why is the fish tank there?
It's odd, yeah, because it's not like they swivel the camera and we're going to see from that point of view or something. We never, maybe they had a shot where they were from another point of view possibly, and they thought that was going to need to be in there. I don't know, but interesting. And we also see that it's a pajama party, which is really fun too.
Back to the fish tank, right? The fish tank was there the night the roof fell in, and in this episode, and I don't think Richie ever fed a fish any other time, did he?
Yeah, where did they go in between?
Everybody's dressed in their pajamas.
Is Buddy wearing Rob's tiger pajamas, do you think?
I don't know. I'll have to go back and see what he's wearing.
Viewers, take a look at that. It looks like the tiger pajamas that Rob wears. Although I don't know if they would fit him that well. I'm not sure, but...
We fade out as that scene ends and get into our tag scene, which is Rob sitting at the dining room table, opening all of his presents.
And I just want to note some of the interesting odd-shaped 60s party hats, which are so fun. They do not make hats like that anymore. Like, they were so neat, so vintage. And then also, did you notice, David, Pickles seems to be sitting in a chair kind of facing Rob with her back to us, which made me think that maybe it wasn't really Pickles and it was maybe a stand-in. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It looks like the back of Pickles' head, right? But Joan Shaw-Lee, who was probably Pickles at this point, doesn't get credit in the episode. And in fact, as you say, if you slow down the motion and you look at the party guests, it seems like we would recognize her, right? And you don't recognize Joan Shaw-Lee, yet the back of that woman's head does appear to be like it looks like hers.
It worked. I thought she was there the whole time. So very cool.
So we're left wondering, and I guess we'll have to each decide that on our own, whether Pickles was really there or not.
Well, Rob starts opening his gifts, and we see now that all of the gifts are sort of coming together. They've all been planned, which, by the way, the tickets to the show, Sally had those way back in that office scene. So was this already in the works? I don't know. Or did they do it later? I'm not sure. So Rob starts opening the gifts, and he gets, what was the first thing he gets? Is it the change?
No, Buddy gave him his chauffeured limousine ride from New Rochelle down to New York.
That's great.
Then Jerry gives him the roll of quarters, change for the West Side Highway for the toll booth. Interestingly, if you listen closely, there's a little bit of a voiceover audio dubbed in after the fact. At the moment that's said, Rob actually puts his hand near his mouth. So I wonder if maybe you couldn't hear what he said and they had to go in and put that in afterwards so we could hear what it was.
Yeah.
Sally presents him, yes, with those 2 tickets, 8-row center.
Thought you were going with your Aunt Agnes. So I lied.
And Mel says, wait, I have one more. So he hands Rob this sort of square box and he opens it to find a corsage inside. Oh, so beautiful.
He tries to put it on his lapel of his pajamas. Nah, it's for your date. Yeah.
Yeah, when they go to the show.
Somebody on a Facebook fan mentioned that the 2 tickets that Rob holds up, that if they looked closer, and it looks like they have the CBS I logo on them, and
They
also,
do.
and also the word surprise, which they thought maybe that was actual tickets to the filming of this very episode. I wasn't sure. I mean, that's really cool if that's true.
Yeah, I would have to look at that. Typically, the tickets for the Dick Van Dyke Show did not have the episode name on them.
Mm-hmm.
It would say the Dick Van Dyke Show and it would have the film date.
I want to go back and take a look at that. Yeah.
I think that I read somewhere at some point that someone had identified what the tickets belonged to, but I can't remember that at this point.
Oh, cool. So. I will seek that out. Yeah, I'm curious. So he's got this whole date night planned. You know, they got tickets to the show, corsage, the limo ride, change for the toll booth, great gift. One final thing is Rob asked them, he says, will you guys do one thing for me? And I say, yeah, what? Anything. He says, will you sing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow? Which is a song as a kid I knew a lot of, but in the last 20 years, it's really not a part of popular culture anymore. You know, you really don't hear it a lot, which I was reminded watching this, like, oh yeah, that's such an old tune. You know, it didn't occur to me that it isn't around anymore, and it really isn't.
Interesting why they chose that particular song that Rob wanted them to sing. I'm not sure.
Yeah. But
the group does concede and sings, and it brings our birthday episode, to a close.
One of the many great birthday episodes that they have. It's kind of has the vibes of the Impractical Joke, you know, where there's sort of like the mystery and Rob's kind of getting one pulled over on him, but he's not sure, and that kind of thing, going back and forth with the outsmarting each other. And it's such a fun thing, and Carl writes it so well. I think I will forever judge my birthdays and parties I've done for people by this one. Like, I've thrown a few surprise parties for loved ones in my day, and it's always been inspired by this episode. Like, okay, I got to do it big. I got to do it in a way that they're not going to know, you know? So just definitely where I was introduced to the concept of a surprise party and like how fun it could be. And also we get Laura here, always smarter than Rob. And Rob, the least smart here. He was the one that got pulled over on. So even Buddy's, you know, lack of college and all that, it doesn't matter. He's a little bit too arrogant, and it kind of gets him in the end where he's the one who's, you know, getting outsmarted.
Most of all, I think we'd like to pause here, though, and recognize the amazing milestone that Dick Van Dyke has achieved in reaching his 100th birthday.
Amazing.
And there was actually another episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show, The Plots Thicken, where his dad mentions something about when you reach the age of 100, almost foreshadowing from the 1960s that somehow Dick Van Dyke would reach this amazing milestone.
Wow.
We're very happy and very pleased to celebrate his 100th birthday, acknowledging this episode and revisiting it together with all of you fans to celebrate with Dick as he attains 100.
Absolutely. And so if you'd like to be notified when our new episodes are released, just feel free to subscribe to our Tripping Over the Ottoman channel on YouTube. You can also find this podcast on all the major streaming platforms.
Remember, we are a community, so we value your comments, your questions, your contributions to the discussion surrounding the show. You can always feel free to leave some feedback for us on the channel or send an email to trippingovertheottoman with the subject of Box 7030. This episode actually wraps season 2 of our podcast, but we will be back early in the new year for season 3 of Tripping Over the Ottoman.
Gonna be a blast.
And yes, more discussion about our favorite episodes. But for today, I'm David.
And I'm Abby. And thanks for tripping over the Ottoman with us. We'll see you next time.
Hey, Dick Van Dyke Show fans, as a fun surprise for all of you listeners, we have a very special holiday giveaway prize.
Courtesy of the Hatchet Book Group, we will be giving away a complimentary copy of Dick's new book. It just got released in mid-November, and it's titled 100 Rules for Living to 100, An Optimist's Guide to a Happy Life.
In order to be entered in the random drawing to win the book, please submit a comment about this podcast episode on our Tripping Over the Ottoman YouTube channel, or send us an email at trippingovertheottoman@gmail.com.
And all comments must be received by 12 midnight on 12/24 to be eligible. So just go ahead and submit your entry today for a chance to win. Happy 100th birthday, Dick.